Hey everyone. Hope you're having a good day, or at least a good afternoon, and a start to an excellent, or at least a wonderful weekend. Today, I have a few things that I wanted to discuss, really briefly, and kind of address the question of what makes for a good special occasion speech, and what does it mean for someone to really think about it, at least strategically, or at least critically enough that they can put themselves into the best position to succeed. I've come up with a little bit of a Google Slides point. You don't actually have to watch it or listen to it. Just have it on in the background while you're kind of contemplating or thinking about work is really all I ask you to do for this one. And I hope we make a good one, or at least have some interesting things for us to think about. Because at the end of the day, that's all these videos are really good for, is just to find one or two interesting things about the way in which you can approach a situation, or at least think strategically or critically about a situation that will allow you to take advantage of any sort of means of persuasion, attention getting, or just really taking advantage of the moment that you are given for the speech. And so, with that said, let us get into it. You're going to hear some old school lo-fi beats in the background. That's because there's one video clip that I want to play. And so the reason I do that is just to make sure my microphone knows that I'm still alive, as you already know. Also, the word lo-fi for me, I have no idea what it means. I spent a good 20 minutes before going to bed last night contemplating that. So if you're ever wondering what sort of things Aaron thinks about before he goes to bed, well, that's it. Okay, so what makes for a good special occasion presentation is what we are going to be trying to figure out, at least here today. And so the first thing I want to do is have a moment where we separate kind of like fact from a fictional basis. We have a cultural understanding and love of a special occasion speech. And you're probably thinking to yourself, where have I seen this culturally a lot? Most of the times in movies. A lot of times movies are actually just set up for one person to come in and give that like role defining speech where everything gets better and the world suddenly goes from the depressed rut it's in into a status of like unbelievable nature, and then the good guys come back and win it. Here's more proof if you needed it.
Will you fight?
Oh, that's too loud. Sorry.
We will run, and we will live.
Shame on you. This could be the greatest night of our lives. You're gonna let it be the worst.
And I guarantee a week won't go by in your life you won't regret walking out, letting them get the best of you.
Well, I'm not going home.
We've got too far! And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I'm not saying it's gonna be easy.
You're gonna work harder than you ever worked before.
But that's fine, we'll just get tougher with it.
If a person grits his teeth and shows real determination,
failure is not an option.
That's how winning is done.
Believe me when I say
We can break this army here.
And win just one for the Gipper.
But I say to you, what every warrior has known since the beginning of time,
you've got to get mad.
I mean plumb mad dog mean.
If you would be free men, then you must
Fight to fulfill that promise. Let us
cut out their living guts.
1 inch at a time.
And they will know what we can do!
Let no man forget how menacing we are. We are lions.
You're like a big bear, man.
This is your time.
Seize the day. Never surrender.
Victory or death.
That's the Chicago way.
Who's with me?
Clap! Clap! Don't let team die! Clap!
All right, let's fly. And gentlemen in England, now
All right, that's enough of us getting unnecessarily pumped up for something that we don't even know that we're getting pumped up for, which also goes to show the manipulation of kind of our emotions through that state of that special magical speech that we would hypothetically be giving one day. And since I believe that is the only actual video that I'm playing in here, what we're gonna do is turn off the sound so you aren't all just jamming to lo-fi beats with me. Which I don't know if you were jamming to them with me. But anyway, this kind of romanticized notion of the special moment, or that special occasion in which the perfect person says the right things, is something that is kind of culturally ingrained into us. Even if you read it into a book, sometimes you'll notice that moment where the book has been written for that one special kind of like monologue that goes off, and then everything changes. There's like a paradigm shift, and the world is a better place. But we're not going to be able to perform that. We're not going to be able to use that kairos, or the opportune moment, to like really speak that truth to whatever power it was supposed to be. And we might not have kind of the capacity to maybe change the world based upon our one sense of oratory and one sense of self, which is why it's an unreasonable expectation. And nobody ever necessarily wants to get let down by their own unreasonable expectation. So I came up with a list of a bunch of little ways in which we could approach kind of the subject and think more in terms of what is the occasion and what is it actually calling for is kind of a better way to approach your speech that you're giving. So for instance, you're giving a wedding toast in a couple weeks and you put it off to the last minute and you're thinking to yourself, ah, crap, I have to get all of this work together. It's going to be a little bit much. Well, what we can do is we can start to ask ourselves a series of questions, which will allow the speech to almost be written for us in a lot of ways. And it will really give us enough constraints that we can work easily within the limitations of what kind of the occasion is calling for that we're going to be speaking at. And so let's actually just get to it. So I have 5 useful tips. One's going to be look at the audience. Who are they? What do they do? The second's going to be the context of the event or the actual speaking situation itself. The third's going to be room management, aka what it means to perform. The fourth is going to be our self-relation to the overarching kind of phenomena of importance that we are going to be talking to. And the fifth thing is going to be, oh, screw it, triage everything and let's just do it live. And those are kind of my 5 useful tips for analyzing the situation and figuring out what is going to make the best kind of speech that we're going to be given. So the first is going to be the audience. Who is the audience? When an audience goes to a place, particularly for a special occasion, they're going to want to feel something. And finding out what that thing is that they are trying to feel in that moment is going to be, I think, the main thrust of the question that you want to ask yourself. So when students come to a class, for instance, most of the time they want the grade, most of the time they are there for, I just need to get my degree, and they said I had to take this public speaking course or I had to take this other course. But there's a large chunk of students that are there for the educatory experience of trying to think differently than they thought of before they originally entered the room. And so that performative aspect is how I try to plan for my live sessions or sessions with students when I have them. And so figuring out what that kind of what that mode of you want to believe in the other person and figuring out what that thing is that they're going to want will allow you to better perform those sorts of tasks while you're putting things together for them. And so the first thing we're going to do is look at our audience, and we're going to say to ourselves, is a captive, voluntary audience, et cetera, and so forth. And that's going to be important, but there are some other questions I want you to start thinking of. The first is going to be, what is the relationship of your audience to the person or people or thing of importance? Whether it's a commencement event, and all of your audience is going to be students for the most part that are graduating, dealing with a lot of uncertainty, things like fears into their lives of the unknown, or preparing for a job market, which always already is pretty hostile of an environment for getting the things that you want. Those are going to be the things that you start to ask yourself when you're about to get the formulation of what it is you need to tell your audience at that particular time. The second thing is your audience going to have any sort of cultural or stylistic similarities in between them for you to utilize for the sake of your own speech? And so when I look at an audience, for instance, and I say to myself, I'm giving a best man speech next week, and I need to make sure that it's going to be well put together, I'm going to look at the audience list and figure out, is this wedding reception just mainly family members? Is it friends? Is it a giant wedding where there's going to be a lot of friends of friends and just random associates brought along? All of those are going to be very helpful for you to know how much sort of behind the scenes you can talk, or what is the acceptable mode of a discourse you can enter into the conversation. Maybe there's not going to be many family members there, and you could be a little bit more crass with your humor, or you can be a little bit more laid back and everyday or quotidian with the way in which you approach a subject matter, are all going to be helpful components when thinking about that. The third thing is going to be, what kind of day is your audience having? And this one is going to be particularly useful on the day of whatever the special occasion is. So go back to the wedding, for instance. Is it then a fun, fantastic, magical event the entirety night through, or has it been raining? Have there been a lot of problems that are currently going on? Or are you introducing a speaker to maybe your fraternity or sorority, and you come to notice to yourself, okay, everybody is kind of being forced to be here, and it's going to be a little bit of a harder space. Maybe I need to do a little bit more loosening up of the audience to make sure that they're going to be a little bit more receptive before they start to listen to the person that I want them to listen to. And so mood management of your audience is also a potential concern that you want to have, because you want everyone to be in the state that you want them to be in. Most of the time, it's going to be a positive, happy state, but there are some instances in which you want the audience to be a little bit more angry. And those are the times where you want something like a revolution to occur, and maybe not hard revolution to occur, but you want them to be upset so that they can go change or modify something in the world. And so figuring out how to put them into that emotional state is also something that you can think of in your speech. And so maybe it's the use of flowery language, or maybe it's the use of harder language, or maybe it is something that says, okay, maybe I just go in and I tell a joke at the start to see if I can get someone to laugh off of the awkward silence before the actual content of the speech begins. And also being prepared for when it falls flat, because sometimes the audience is just so in a mood, regardless of what you do, is not going to change how they are potentially going to feel, or they'll just get upset and hostile if you're not performing those emotions that they want you necessarily to perform. The second thing is going to be the context. So all occasions that are special have a specific context to them, which gives us a list of requirements that we can start to at least think of when we're thinking of what we should be doing when we should be preparing. The first is going to be, are there folks that are going to need acknowledgement? So all occasions happen through the complexities of events that lead us into that specific occasion in the first place. If you are having a lecture, or you are giving a TED talk to a group of farmers out in Idaho. One of my friends actually did that recently. I know that sounds like the most random thing of all time, but he was also like, it was the most random thing of all time. But the context allows it to be set up. Did people fly you there? Did they put you there on the stage to be speaking in the first place? And if that's said, do you need to acknowledge those specific people in the speech? Because showing humility and showing gratitude is also a very good part of being the performance of the speaker that you want to be when you are in those stages. And it also puts you in a positive light through the audience whenever you're thinking about it. Do you need to acknowledge somebody who hasn't been acknowledged in the conversation with what all sorts of great things they did? Might require a little bit of background research on your part, but it's something I would always think to myself that including it in just like a 5-second brief will get you so much goodwill at the event that it is almost always the right thing that you want to be doing. The second is going to be, what are any environmental and factors that are going to impact your speech? So in special occasions, there's oftentimes alcohol involved. There's also real and cultural constraints which are going to kind of pop up for that special occasion. So you're giving a speech outside. Well, what if it starts to rain? What if the neighbor starts mowing their grass, or somebody drives up in a car? Are all sorts of things that you need to start to prepare yourself for, or at least be able to talk about in your speech if it's going to be a part of why you're giving the speech in the first place. Or maybe there's something you can utilize or at least foster when that occurs. So maybe if you're giving that TED talk out in rural Idaho and you're thinking to yourself, okay, here's what's going on. These farmers really want to talk about maize, for instance. Maybe you could have references and points to it as you are currently out there. The third thing is going to be for the room management, aka our delivery. Most individuals want to see a performance whenever they're doing a special occasion speech. And so what does that mean? How does someone act in that performative vein? I'm not here to train you to be a professional actor, nor am I qualified to train you to be a professional actor, but I will say that a special occasion speech leads more to the actor side than the actual, or the thespian side than the actual kind of more stand speak proper. This is going to be the normalized techne of my performance kind of regard. So you have to be a little bit more flexible with how you're going to work, position yourself in a room and manage the room, which means finding ways to make the audience feel acknowledged if that's what they are there to do. The only time there's really an exception to this is if you're giving a special occasion speech in an auditorium, then the audience will have to manage that on their own because it would just become an impossible kind of constraint to really talk to 1,000 people max. And if you are in that situation, which I've been in that a few times, it's one of those things where you will just be looked at through your performance and its like totality of your body and you performing to the audience at writ large, than the actual need to say, I'm going to walk down here and talk to these folks, or I'm going to walk over here and talk to these folks. And so you can remove that layer of acknowledgement from the first slide and instead really just hone in on your own performance of how you're going to holster your body, how you're going to manage your gestures, how you're going to look and speak to all of those individuals that need looked and speak to while you continually speak. And so this is one of those steps that is only going to happen during the performance, but it's also an important thing that I want you to think of, in particular when you give your first kind of special occasion speech out there in the real world, is I want you to have like a debrief session afterwards to yourself, because odds are it's not going to be perfect, and it might have actually been perfect. It'll probably be pretty good if you're doing the correct things, which is like preparing and doing the analysis to get yourself into that position in the first place. But have a debrief session where you're just like, what went wrong? What wasn't I anticipating? What wasn't I really thinking of? So that we can learn and be prepared for the next time we ever encounter those problems. And I know a lot of people are just like, I'm not going to speak that much in public, Aaron. Well, you could. I didn't plan on speaking a bunch in public a lot of times and just kind of get thrown into the situation. It could easily happen to a lot of individuals in here. And I know a lot of individuals in here probably might even have speaking as a part of their job, which could be a just general rule of thumb for you to say, okay, I know I'm going to be talking a lot. And so how can I continually make or at least hone this practice into be better, or at least a better version of myself, is definitely a good life skill that I think we want to take with us after we leave this class. The last is going to be the self-relation to what is your self-relation to the actual object itself. So your friends are getting married, maybe you're a friend in that kind of relationship, or you're giving a speech. We'll take the speech that I gave at the church in Ohio, for instance, on poverty. I was brought in to be a person that gave a large conversation about empathizing with poverty and the dangers that are inherent or associated into it whenever we just look for kind of like an emotional let off or kind of doing that kind of disaster tourism. But beyond that, the goal for them was to bring me in to have a conversation about fixing material poverty and not getting caught up only into language at different points in times. And so I knew that in advance, which let me go in, well, which let me prep my speech in a very particular way to meet those kind of requirements that people were looking for, or at least trying to get more knowledge or a background discussion on. And so in a lot of ways, the reason in which you are chosen to speak can really dictate all of the things that you do or all of the things you say, which for this kind of speech, you're going to have to do a lot of imaginatory work to put yourself into that position in the first place, but really kind of just like spending a good 20 to 30 minutes sitting and thinking to yourself, okay, I was invited to speak at this funeral. Why me? And why that person or why that thing will really just put the words on the paper for you for the most part, which is why it's always one of my go-to tips that I always like to leave as a recommendation. The last step is this is all going to be impromptu by nature. I know I said last earlier, but this is kind of a side conclusory last, is most of this is going to be impromptu by nature. The goal is to just create a general blueprint for what you want to do and what you want to go to perform, but you have to be adaptable in a special occasion kind of presentation. So normally I get harp really hard on don't overtly manuscript your entire speech, because you can get away with it but it's a waste of time, and it's not going to allow you to have that real flexibility that you're going to want if you're going to go in and be able to kill that speaking engagement or that speaking kind of situation. And so being able to just be on the fly, like, okay, now I'm going to talk about this. This is the embodiment of what I wanted to do, and be able to make those tweaks and gestures to perform a little bit differently, because maybe you're walking around the room and somebody just slows down the roll of your speech for a second. That memorizational aspect usually just goes out the window, and it becomes hard to kind of recover quickly in a way that allows you to continue working towards your goal, which is to give a good speech at the event in which you are giving a speech at the event. Finally, how can we put this 10, 20-minute conversation discussion into something practical for your kind of online public speaking course? This is a great question, mainly because we are all kind of disconnected right now, fortunately or unfortunately or not. And so what do? You're sitting there in front of your camera. It's time to hit the go button. It's time to talk for 3 to 4 minutes. Maybe you're giving me a speech that's just like, I'm celebrating the end of the semester, or maybe you're giving me a speech that's just like, I am celebrating existence. I don't know. What do people celebrate? But anyway, how do you kind of put that imaginatory audience into the conversation, or put the imaginatory wedding into the conversation when you're there? And my best recommendation is just work within the constraints that you have, and making sure that we continually do things like just assume that there's an audience somewhere in the room with you, and kind of just like look over and gesture towards them sometimes. And that can be a good, useful way for you to continually practice when you're doing this kind of digital delivery. I know a lot of folks, for the most part, when they're doing their speeches in this class, will just stare at the camera, just like, I'm having a conversation into your soul right now, Aaron. I can see all of your deepest, darkest fears, and they're very stupid, which makes you feel stupid, because who has stupid, deepest, darkest fears? Anyway, I know some of you don't actually do that. Please don't do that. That would actually terrify me a little bit. But beyond that, when you have that moment where you're just staring into a camera, it doesn't have that kind of like, it doesn't train the things that we need to train, specifically when it comes to putting ourselves in that awkward situation, which allows us to go through it and continually learn about the nuances of public performance. And so that's really where we want to be as a terminal end goal, at least for finalizing this speech. Because at the end of the day, remember, this class isn't designed to be here to give you a grade or grade things. It's designed, well, I mean, it is, but that's not the goal. The goal is for us to continually work on the performative elements of being able to continually talk to a group of people and have kind of that charisma or that appeal that really allows us to set ourselves as a speaker apart from the other speakers. And so that is mainly what I wanted to at least talk about and address today. If you have any questions with anything related to your special occasion speech, please let me know. And even if you don't, and just randomly have questions about life, you know, you can always email me or shoot me a message or leave a comment somewhere, and I will respond. Okay. Thank you all very much, and I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Be good to yourselves.